So hi there, this is Joy Foster. I am the founder of TechPixies, and I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Townsend, author of Survival Skills for Freelancers. Sarah, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we are so delighted that we get to talk about survival skills for freelancers. I think right now in this pandemic, surviving is one of the key traits that most people are having to do. And for freelancers, they've been hit particularly hard. So definitely interested in your insights. How are you finding freelancing through the pandemic?
I think I've been very lucky, actually. I've been busier than ever, and I don't think that's just because I've just launched a best-selling book in the middle of the pandemic. That was just by pure chance. So yeah, my client work's been busy. I've had to probably turn down more work than I've taken on, which is it's not ideal, is it? But it's a nice position to be in. And the other positive about that is that I have quite a good network of other freelancers, and it means that I get to pass work on to them and keep them busy as well. So it's all good.
Well, I agree that it's so important to stay positive and focused on, and you're better off having more customers that you can't work with and having to let them go than having the problem of not having enough customers.
Yes.
So that's also very, very important. But I do think, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of subconscious reprogramming work and, kind of extinguishing the automatic negative thoughts. And what's really, really interesting about the way people talk about facing challenges is they either see a challenge and then they see all the things that they can't do, or they, that they don't want, or they see a challenge and they see all the things that they do want and what they can do. And so I think it's really important to, I love how, I just asked you that question, in the pandemic, freelancers are struggling, and you're like, actually, my work is going really well. Actually, I'm busier than I should, than I normally
am. Saying it though, because I know so many people out there are really struggling. So it's a really difficult one because I want to be positive and I want to spread that positivity and the importance of the positive thinking and avoiding negative self-talk and getting into that downward spiral. But to be perfectly honest, I have terrible days. I have real bad days, and I'm somebody who my energy is always up here, 100 miles an hour, or I'm just up on brakes on the driveway. I'm completely stalled.
Well, you talk about that in the book. You talk about good days and bad days. This is part of, myth 7. So you've got 8 myths. You bust 8 myths in the book. So let's just go through the book, the myths, and then, then people can decide whether or not they want to read it, but I think they're going to want to get their hands on it. Okay. So, myth number 1 is all about isolation. So you have the myth, which is, I like my own company. I don't need anyone else. So you bust that myth.
That's the community section. That's a big one.
Then myth number 2 is about outsourcing. So the person who's freelancing that thinks that they have to do it all, sales, marketing, admin, accounts, that's a myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we've got myth 3, which is all about professionalism, where people think, oh, I'm just a freelancer. It's not the same as running a business. So that's a big one you got to bust. Myth number 4 is I'm still building my reputation. It's okay to work for free sometimes. We're going to talk a lot about this one today, about value. Okay, myth number 5 is all about instinct. So I shouldn't turn work down, even if my instinct tells me to say no. So yeah, that's a big one.
The hard way, big time.
Yeah, me too. I mean, before I ran a business, I was a freelancer, so I know exactly I've done all of these. I've believed all these myths, right? Myth number 7 is I love my job. Every day should be a good day. So that's what we were just talking about. So, and taking care of yourself on good days and bad days.
Yeah.
And then myth number 8 is once I have experience, failure won't bother me, and dealing with imposter syndrome.
This is my biggest. This is the one I struggle with even 21 years down my freelance journey. Just can't seem to get rid of it for good.
The imposter syndrome. Well, we can definitely talk about that because that's really important. A lot of women struggle with that. When we know that from our from our coaching, life coaching in the social media magic program, that we actually dedicate a whole week to imposter syndrome because it's one of those things that people really struggle with. Yeah. Okay, well, there's so many here. I think the one that I really want to focus on, well, I want to focus on a couple, but I want to focus on myth number 2, which is all about outsourcing, myth number 4, which is all about value, And myth number 5, I want to talk about instinct a little bit. And I think we can touch on imposter syndrome as well. So let's just talk about outsourcing, because I think what a lot of people think is when they freelance, they've got to do it all, right? They've got to do the accounting, the bookkeeping, everything, the sales, the marketing. So what do you outsource in your business?
I outsource my accounts to my ex-husband, but that's a whole other story. I outsource my IT support. That was a real big one. I have in the past outsourced a lot of my admin, but at the moment I'm kind of between VAs and looking for the right person who can help me out, because I feel like I've got, you know, that meme, my brain has too many tabs open. That's me, just all the time. I want to be doing all the things and I want to be doing them all at once, and I can't. I don't have the skills to do all the things. So I feel like there's a fourth. What is the fourth? Oh, well, I use somebody to do proofreading of my own marketing. And I also use somebody to do my graphic design. So things like my proposal documents are beautiful and I've got a lovely template, rather than just sending clients back or potential clients back a Word doc or a Canva doc. I've actually got a properly, beautifully designed document that gives all the background information as well. So
that's amazing. How hard was it for you to give? Which one did you give up first, and how hard was it for you to do that?
It was so hard because I don't think I outsourced anything until about 15 years into my 21 years of running my own business.
Wow. Hold on. Let's just talk about that. You waited 15 years in running your business for 21 years before you started outsourcing stuff?
Before I outsourced anything. I used to do my own accounts, and I'd have all the pressure and the stress and think, oh, I've got to do my self-assessment back then. And I couldn't get over the mental hurdle of thinking, well, I have to pay someone to do these things.
Yeah. Okay. Now this is really important. A lot of women feel that way. They go, how can I afford to pay someone else if I can't even afford to pay myself? That's one of the first things they say. I want to know what happened to your income though, when you did start outsourcing.
I have to say my income went up, and it went up quite a lot. And I think it's a huge mindset thing, this, because once I use the example in the book of, I was really struggling. I was kind of on the verge of burnout again. And I was constantly overwhelmed. I wasn't nice to be around. I can't remember if this was after I got divorced or before. Maybe it was before. Maybe it was a contributing factor, but you didn't hear that from me. But I just used to feel like I had to do everything. And like most people who go self-employed, we go self-employed because we have a skill, the secret sauce that we want to bring to the world and we want to share with more people. And that's the thing that we love doing. And we think that by becoming self-employed, we get to do more of that thing. But what nobody really prepares us for, you aside, I have to say, because obviously you are teaching people this, but I certainly had no idea that there was going to be all this huge business end of self-employment, that you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. I didn't ever consider myself to be a salesperson. I hated the idea of selling my services. Well, kind of to a certain degree still do, but it was a mindset shift. So I think the difference is, once you have got into the mindset that actually paying someone else who is an expert at these things, they have the skills that you don't necessarily have. They do the things that you don't enjoy doing, that you dread doing, that take all the time in the headspace, probably a lot quicker than it would take you to do them, and a lot better. And the brilliance of it is it frees you up all this time and all this headspace to do the stuff that you love doing, which is the reason you went self-employed in the first place. So yes, you're paying someone, but they're doing a better job than you could do in less time. And in an ideal world, certainly with me now, most of the people that I paid to do the work, I earn more than they do in my,
Well, you have a great formula in your book, which I've highlighted. And the formula is, it's a simple equation. As much time as possible doing the things that make you money, plus as little time as possible doing the things that don't, equals the secret to freelance success. And I love that because, and we'll talk about how you price yourself in a minute, because you do have to make sure that your rate, whether it's hourly or if it's based on value, which of course we are very much advising women to stop doing an hourly rate and do more of a value rate.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that your rate covers all of the other things that you need people to do for you, because and people understand that. I mean, that was the most interesting thing to me once I started charging a margin, like adding a margin into my prices. So I started when I was running Made with Joy, I started charging 2 times, or I think it was 2 times the rate that I was paying my team, and also like 3 times the rate I was paying myself. And then what we could do is take the margin, and then we could afford the accountant and the bookkeeper and the other things that we needed in the business. Those were my first hire was was an admin person who I didn't like the word admin, so I called her my COO, my chief operating officer.
Like that.
And then my second hire was a bookkeeper, because that was the one thing that I really didn't like doing, but I knew I needed to outsource. And it took so much time, and I got immediately a bunch of time back, and that's the balance of time is so huge with being a freelancer. And you talk about it. People go into it thinking it's going to be this glamorous thing that they can just fit around other things. And actually, until you take it seriously and turn it into a business, you find yourself working more than, more than 65% of people work more than 5 days, and, long days, and, and you're not getting the breaks that you really need. So making it more professional and making it run more like a business and outsourcing the stuff you don't want to do definitely helps move that forwards in your favor. So how do we do that? If we don't do hourly rates, which you definitely are against as well in the book.
I am very strongly.
Yeah, talk about how you price your services and how people should value themselves properly, because what you talk about is if you don't value yourself, your clients won't either. And you talk about how women work for free for way too long. So how do you get out of working for free and get into charging?
It's a really big and a really important mindset shift. I think very much like the change that comes when you decide that you can outsource those things. And it's like, just to very quickly circle back to something you just said, yes, the money side is so important to get right. But at the same time, it's just sort of a secret to getting more enjoyment from self-employment. So it's not just about how much money you can earn. It's about how much fulfillment and how much happiness you feel day to day in your job. And if you're focusing on the things that you're good at, then you're just going to enjoy your work more than struggling along with the things that cause you problems and you don't enjoy doing. So what was the question again?
It's how do you switch well, first of all, how do you switch from going from not charging and doing work for free to then charging? But then how do you decide, I'm not going to charge an hourly rate, but I'm going to charge a value package? And how do you put that together?
Yeah, it was one thing that I knew really early on. I didn't want to go in as at the cheap end of the scale. And I say this to a lot of people, it doesn't really matter how long you've been freelance. That is kind of irrelevant. What matters is your experience. So you might have been employed, you might have been working in an agency for 5 years or 10 years or whatever. That's what you've got to focus on. That's how much experience you have. You don't say, okay, well, I've only been freelance for 3 months. How can I possibly charge this much? What you have to look at is the fact that you're bringing all this experience and all these skills to the table. So I get on my soapbox about day rates and hourly rates quite often. So you have to kind of hold me back. Rein me in if you need to.
No, go for it. People need to hear this.
I think it's a really important fact that we have to educate our clients, because they don't know a better way. So I get emails even now from people saying, what's your day rate? I'm kind of like, well, my day rate is irrelevant. For starters, I don't ever charge a day rate unless I'm getting a client on a retainer, and then it is paid on that sort of basis. But generally
speaking, I think if someone comes out with what's your day rate, that's like a red herring. That's like a sign that they're the wrong client, because they're asking for the price and not talking about what they need and what they want.
Yes, it's a red flag, and it's something that raises alarm bells. but at the same time, they just might not know any different. So if I go back to them and they say, look, I don't work on a day rate basis. What I want to do is get a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So it's not necessarily what you think you need, but what you actually need to help you get from where you are now to where you want to be. And to actually, to get you there, I'm going to work out exactly what it's going to cost so you can budget up front. It's no good me going back to you and saying, my day rate's £300 or £600 or whatever it is, because you don't know how fast I am, how good I am, and how long it's going to take to get that work done. So I use the example in the book of a client who contacts use copywriters as an example, because that's what I know. So if a client comes to 3 copywriters and approaches them all in the same way and says, hello, I've got some work for you, what's your day rate? And the three copywriters go back and say, okay, 200, 400, 600 for the sake of argument. Chances are they won't go for the cheapest, because they might assume that cheap means, well, they can't really be that good. They'll probably do the psychology thing, which is going for the one in the middle.
You call that the Goldilocks effect in the book.
Yeah, it's the Goldilocks effect. Yeah. So if you are charging a day rate, it's looking for a rate that's not too steep, not too cheap, but somewhere comfortably in the middle. But ultimately, that still doesn't help the client out that much, because they don't know. You might take 4 days to complete the project to a really high standard, whereas the cheaper freelancer might take 10 days and do half as good a job. So that's why I get quite ranty when I hear people talking about what their day rates are. And I also find it frustrating when people say, oh, I charged this, I quoted this rate, and then they came back and said, well, somebody's quoted cheaper, so I've reduced my rate. I genuinely don't think you should do that. I think have the courage of your convictions and know what you're worth and stick to it. Because the minute you go back and say, oh, okay, well, I'll knock £100 off, you're undervaluing yourself. You're going to take on the work and resent. So you're thinking, you kind of, this resentment builds up and you're stewing and thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't undercut. Whereas there are clients out there who will quite happily pay a higher rate, or a rate that reflects what you're worth based on your skills and experience and the things you bring to the table. So I always use the clients that quibble as a sign that those are not the clients that I want to work with.
And that's actually your 5th myth, is
exactly.
Just when your instinct tells you this is the wrong thing to do, it's probably right. You need to follow that. So let me go back to this value thing for a minute, because I really want to speak to those ladies who are charging for nothing, right? Who are working 3 months, 6 months, they're still not charging because they don't have the belief in their skills. So what I want to encourage you to do, if you're listening to this podcast and and I've just called you out because you're charging nothing for the work that you're doing, what I want you to do is track your hours. This was a trick that my husband taught me. Just start tracking your hours, start to see how long it takes to do the work that you're doing. And then just put a rate on it, right? Just put, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever you want, just put a rate on it. This is just for those people who are not charging at all, just to get them starting to think about this. And then what I want you to do is I want you to invoice the client for the full amount of the hours that you've done. Now, this is still going back to the hour versus time, but I want you to do this exercise because I think it'll teach you something. You invoice them for the full amount. So let's say you're doing 20 pounds an hour and you've done 100 hours of work. That's a £2,000 bill. You're going to give the client the £2,000 bill, and you're going to put a line on there that says discount 100%. And then you're going to take £2,000 off, and it's going to be a 0. But you're going to give them a document that says, I just gave you £2,000 of free work, right? And then now you're starting to know, because I think part of the problem people don't charge is they don't know how long things take. They don't know. They don't know. And when I'm saying you're monitoring everything, I'm saying all the emails that you spend emailing them, all the phone calls, all the WhatsApp messages, all the time you actually do on the work, all the time you are learning how to do the work, right? This is something as well. Like if someone needs to deliver a job well, sometimes you have to go learn something that you didn't know how to do. So you bundle all that in, because that starts to give you an idea. Okay, it takes me £2,000 to do this project. Now, here's the other thing too, and I think, Sarah, you can attest to this as well. You get faster as you get better at what you're doing. And so what might have taken you 100 hours now suddenly takes you 50 hours, but that doesn't mean that you charge 50% of what you charged before, because you're bringing all this knowledge. So you actually get to benefit. The faster and smarter you get, the more you benefit, because you get a bigger margin. You do less time and you earn the same amount, or you earn more. So I do think it's really important to do that exercise of creating invoices, just because what you'll really work out is that, let's say you're working for 6 months for free and you're doing 2,000 pounds of work every month for free. And this is just like to get you going. But that ends up being 12,000 pounds that you've just given away that could have been in your bank account.
That's such a great tip. I've never heard that before, actually. I do say in the book to practice money conversations with your partner or a trusted friend, or even I've done it with my grown-up kids. If you kind of feel that something's a little bit uncomfortable, or you're looking to put your rates up and you're just not sure how to go about doing it, just keep practicing until it gets comfortable. Or another tip that I share in the book is write your rate down in a big black marker on a post-it note or a piece of paper, and stick it on your laptop or on your desk behind your laptop, and just get used to associating that's my value, until it becomes a comfortable thing for you. It is something that it just feels uncomfortable to begin with. And also I think a lot of us are brought up with a real discomfort over money conversations. I certainly was. And the money chapter in the book is by far the most personal of all. And it's just something that to begin with, I kind of thought, well, how could I possibly charge that much? And again, it's all tied into imposter syndrome and self-belief and negative self-talk. It's all one big bundle.
But I think at the very least, if you can put a number on it and you can start to see what the value would be if you were charging, it really puts you in a good position to say, right, the next time I do this, I know what it's going to cost, right, to deliver that. There's a great question that's come on the live. Obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see the question, so I'll read it here. Carol says, if the client is looking for a cheap deal, could you educate them that they're not valuing themselves enough to value you?
That's a tough one. I would imagine that is part of the problem, but whether you can educate your client and educate yourself at the same time, I don't know. Would you want to? I think that's the thing.
Is it worth the time and effort?
Precisely. I think it's easy for me to say because I am consistently busy, but I genuinely think even if you're quite new to self-employment, really have that belief that if you do trust your instinct, we're heading slightly into that next category, but if you do trust your instinct and you have a client who wants to quibble and says, well, that's a bit expensive, well, have the confidence to go back to them and say, well, look, this is the price. If your budget doesn't stretch to this, I can deliver less for less money, but if you want the full package, this is what it costs.
And I think you're totally right, Sarah. It's that idea that, do you want to spend the time educating someone, or do you want to go find the people who value you? Yeah. And here's the opportunity, Carol, to say, do you know what? I don't think you fully value my services. It's not going to work out this time. I can't work with you. And then that's where the conversation where they go, no, I really want to work with you. Well, then you need to pay the rate that I'm worth, right? So that's when you can have that conversation. But I think I once had a client, I've told this story several times. I once had a client who, and actually, Elaine, I can totally relate to this. I'm going to put Elaine's comment up here for a second. But I once had a client where I worked, I did about 1,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds worth of work on her account. She paid 1,000. And just like Elaine's just said that she had a project that changed 3 times and it changed 190 degrees, all that stuff. It was signed for 20 hours per week for 6 months, and the whole thing changed on her. Well, the crazy thing on this contract was, at the end of the day, it was easier to give her the 1,000 pounds back, eat the 2,000 that I had to pay my team to deliver part of her work, and just get her out of the system. And I was like, good riddance, because she was the most difficult client I'd ever worked with. And it was like, what I agreed to do and what you are now wanting is not the same thing. So scope creep is really important. Now, Sarah, this is where I would say, and we talk about this very seriously on our strategy module in TechPixies, which we just released last week, but we talk about a contract. Like really important to have a contract that says, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, this is what's in my remit, this is what's not in my remit. If it changes, this is what happens. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. It's something that I didn't do for the first X number of years, but yes, it is really important. Otherwise, it's your word against theirs, and you don't want to get into that messy state of affairs where you're spending so much of your time trying to argue with what you agreed to and what you didn't agree to. If it isn't in writing, it's very difficult to justify any of that stuff. So yes, have it all set out really clearly, what is and what isn't included in your price. And as you say, Joy, what happens if the brief changes, the price changes?
Yeah, and if that's agreed in advance and signed, and it's, if everything's been talked through, and this is what I say too. I say don't talk about money first, right? Really get to what they want. Like you said, where are they now? Where do they want to be? Figure what that is out first, and figure out what that is first. And then you go to the drawing board and you say, okay, now that I know what you want, here are all of the pieces that we need to put in place to deliver it. These are the things I deliver. These are the things I'm going to need you to deliver. Like if you don't do the graphic design, or if you don't do the sales calls, if you don't, and it's really understanding what they want, and then really going to the drawing board and saying, okay, here's what I can deliver on what you want, and understanding what piece you play in that as well. Because, you might be able to build a social media following, you might be able to build an email list, but then if they have no facility to turn that into a sale, then it's, you've done your job, but they haven't done their job too. So you also have to be conscious of the business itself, is whether or not they're even ready to work with you.
That's really important, actually. Yeah, that's a good thing to mention.
But I love what you talked about with the professionalism, about having a professional invoice and having a professional contract and all those things. So where did you go to get your contracts and invoices and everything set up properly? Did you use did you outsource that, or was that how did you work that out?
Various different things, actually. I used to use, in my last employed role, I was an editor and an account manager for a magazine publishing company, and it was quite an unusual setup. Each editor had their own designer who worked on their magazines and created the original design for the magazines. But then when we got our features in from our journalists, we would edit them within Quark Express. So when I first went freelance 21 years ago, I was super proficient at Quark Express, and I miss it to this day because it was probably the piece of software that I've understood better than anything else in my entire life. And I put together my own invoice documents, which used to be sent out in paper with a stamp in an envelope. And yeah, so when I stopped doing that, it never occurred to me that I could have got help doing that sort of thing. But I switched over to cloud-based accounting through Xero, and Xero let you set up your own template for your own invoices, so that's kind of branded. And yeah, as I say, I work with a couple of graphic designers for different elements of my business, and I have branded kind of everything, really. So yeah, it's definitely worth speaking to an expert. Actually, this is a point that's worth mentioning. Just very quickly, referring back to what you said about the not working free, there is one exception to that rule, and that's a skill swap. So it's not, strictly speaking, it's not working free. You're getting something and you're giving something in return. So yeah, to begin with, I did a lot of skill swapping with my graphic designers, and they needed copy for their own websites or their own brochures or whatever, and in exchange, you have to be very careful setting up the terms for that again.
Yeah, so you do.
But it is something that can work really well across small business owners and freelancers.
Well, I think all of this is extremely valuable, and you're right. Skill swapping is doable depending on the skills that you're swapping and depending on the outcomes. One of the things you talk about in the book, and this goes back to valuing yourself and earning what you're worth, is the idea that when you were trying to figure out your money mindset piece, you read a couple books. So you recommend a couple books that you read when you were doing that, which of course we have a very long growing book recommendation list, which will be available at techpixies.com/Joy Book Club, along with the recommendation to read Sarah's book. But one of the books that you read talked about someone who was hesitant to raise her prices. But what the coach said was, if you double your rate and you lose half your customers, you've just kept the same amount in the bank, but you have like double the time available.
The amount of time.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting exercise. So I guess the first step is charging in the first place. Then the second step is doubling your rate and reducing the number of customers. I know I had we used to build websites, so I worked with a lot of freelancers, and I had a freelance wedding hair specialist who we built her website, gorgeous website, and she it was always difficult talking to her because she would call me and she'd say, well, I can't pay, I can't afford you. And I'd say, well, didn't you tell me you're booked till December? And it would be like January. Yes, I'm booked till December. And I said, well, your prices are too low. I said, if you just doubled your prices, you could afford me, because you're booked out. And I think that's the other thing too. If you are fully booked, your prices are too low.
Yeah. And you have no scope to put your prices up, because you have all the scope to put your prices up. You have no scope to earn anymore. If you're fully booked and you're still not earning enough, then yes, as you say, your prices are too low, and you don't necessarily need to think about doubling them. That feels like a pretty scary experience, or a pretty scary thing to have to achieve. But I do know coaches who advocate that. But even if you just wanted to put your price up by £100 a day, I mean, I'm talking like inside your head day rates rather than quoted day rates. You have to know roughly what your day rate is so that you can work out your costs to begin with, right? But if you put your price up a bit and you lose a couple of clients on the back of it, there will still be clients who, if you're positioning yourself in the right way and you're selling the value of what you deliver as a service, then there will be people out there who will pay your rates, and those are the people who are the right fit with your business. So
don't you think the scariest part of raising your rates is the first time you do it?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. After that, it becomes easy. Like, it really genuinely does become easy.
Just like firing your first client. Like, the first time you fire your first client is really hard, but then afterwards you like, oh no, get rid of those people.
Yeah. Or just don't take them on in the first place. That's what I just think when you get tuned in to who are the ones who just don't feel the right fit for you. And I always give the example in the book as well, that if you just get that little split second feeling of fear when their name comes up on your phone and you're like, oh, and it's almost imperceptible. You answer the call and then you're sort of like, oh, and you come off the phone thinking, oh, well, I'm not sure I want to do this. Then just have put your big girl pants on and just tell them no from the outset, because the further you get down the line and the more embroiled you get with dealing with that client, the harder it is to walk away and say no.
Well,
but
we like to call them brave pants at TechPixies.
I like it.
Put your brave pants on, and just, and that's the thing, have the courage. And this, my favorite quote from one of my other favorite authors is Jennifer Allwood. And she says, confidence comes from having the courage to do things that you've never done before, and then realizing you didn't die. So if you say no to someone, or if you raise your prices and you don't die, you're fine.
I love that. I haven't come across that before.
But I think it's really important to be, to push yourself, to challenge yourself. Now, here's something that I have just been starting to learn through a lot of the mindset work and the transformational coaching programs that I'm a part of, is understanding the idea that the universe is constantly expanding. Like, it's always expanding. And we know this, it's not like this is like a theory. It's actually expanding. So here's the thing about human nature is it also expands. Once you learn one thing, you want to learn something else. Once you charge one thing, you want to charge something else. Like, we want to be better, right? We want to be better. We want to have more free time. We want to have more money in the bank account. We want to spend more quality time with the people we love. And once you start to get those things, you want more of them, because it's part of the way the universe is designed. You are designed to want more. And what happens is you get scared about wanting more, or you have a weird relationship with wanting more, which is totally normal and is based on what you grew up with and not anything that you've chosen yourself. But then you have to, as an adult, you have to say, enough's enough. I'm not going to carry on with this way of thinking if I want to change my life. And one thing we really care about, and I know you do too, is financial independence for women.
Yeah.
So here you are, you've gone through a divorce, and you had to come back on your feet financially, and that's not easy to do.
No, I've been a single mum for 12 years, and I get that. For me, that's probably my biggest achievement, is the fact that I've been able to provide financial security for not just myself, but for my kids. And my daughter's down in a uni now. My son's 18. To have achieved that for me is a really big deal. That's kind of my definition of success in a way, because when I was growing up, and again, I'm very, very open and heart on your sleeve about this in the book. I was brought up with the jumble sale mentality. We would go to jumble sales, and I remember buying things for 2p at jumble sales. I mean, that dates me, right? Because I've been doing this a long time. But all my clothes were hand-me-downs. We never had holidays. My toys were handmade. And that's not a sub story, because honest to God, that brought me up with the healthiest of respects for money. And to begin with, it used to just really mean that I felt I couldn't do anything. So I would never think, oh, let's go and have a holiday or whatever. I never really felt like I'd kind of got there in terms of that security. But yeah, touch wood, touching my windowsill there, it's I feel like I've kind of got there now, because I feel as if I was able to take, for example, the whole of January off to finish writing my first draft of my manuscript for the book. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not got to the stage of my career that I'm at now. And that was what it felt like was driving me to write the book. I thought, well, I feel like I've got to this level where I just want to give back to people now. I just want to help as many people learn from my mistakes. And the fact that it's taken me the best part of 15 years to learn most of the stuff in the book, because when I started, this guidance, this stuff in here did not exist. There was barely any internet. There was certainly no social media. There was no TechPixies. There were no communities. There was no Facebook groups, no Twitter hours. All this stuff that we have now that we take for granted is just so, so valuable and so key.
Well, and I think that's just it. We live in an incredible day and age where we can, very seamlessly switch from working in offices and face-to-face to online and on Zoom all the time. Yeah. However, that ability to do that, I think it will benefit women in the long term, as long as we can sort out childcare and other, partners getting involved and helping around with the house. I think it's really important that we do embrace technology. And I think what you're saying here, which is so important, is that you don't have an excuse in 2020. There are online courses to teach you how to do anything you want to do. There are books that share their hearts, that open up all their mistakes. I mean, that's what Sarah's done in this book. She's really opened up about all of the things she struggled with mentally as a freelancer and how she overcame them. What a gift that is to other freelancers. And I think that it would be a total mistake in 2020 or 2021, whenever you're listening to this, to decide to be a freelancer and then not educate yourself about money mindset, number one, because you got to overcome that hurdle. But number two, learn from people who've been in your shoes. Do an online course, read a book. There are no excuses in 2020, 2021 for women, because becoming financially independent, being a single mom, just like you've shown, Sarah, being a single mom, being able to take care of yourself financially and not working for someone else, but working for yourself is 100% doable. And you are the perfect epitome of that. So I think people need to recognize that we live in the most incredible age right now, because that you can learn anything you want, and you can and that's going to come out of books, and it's going to come out of online courses in a way that we just didn't have access to, I would say, for sure 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago.
Yeah, and certainly not 21 years ago.
I started my freelance journey in about 2004. 2014. And I lasted as a freelancer for about a year. And then I was like, enough of this freelance stuff. I'm building a business. and the irony is that freelancers are building a business, right? It's just Are you building a scalable business as a freelancer? No, you're probably not. Now, some people start out as a freelancer and then they start to move towards scalable businesses or businesses where they employ people to do work for them and things like that. But you have to choose. That's kind of your choice. Do you want to do that? Do you not want to do that? I didn't want to do that. At the end of the day, I thought freelancing is not for me. I want to build a business. That's what I wanted. Like and freelancing is a business. Let's not, sugarcoat that. Freelancing is a business. It's just, are you building a business that you can scale and, serve thousands or tens of thousands, that turns over millions? Or are you building a business that really suits your lifestyle, your family, what you want to do, very niche, and where you work with a few people that make sure that things, run properly? That's really the difference, wouldn't you say?
I would say, and there's no shame in wanting for it to always be just you, because as we've covered already, there are ways of growing and making your business stronger and more successful. And you can do that by outsourcing and knowing what to charge and surrounding yourself with those people, that kind of cheerleading team of other people who are there to support and help your business. It doesn't mean you have to employ people, but equally, I've pulled in freelance colleagues on bigger projects that I've worked on. So I'll recommend a designer, a photographer, a web developer, and this sort of thing. So you can grow that way. It doesn't mean you have to grow by taking on staff. There are just different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, you can partner with your other freelancers and build something really cool.
And I love doing that. Yeah.
Well, I want to just acknowledge you for sharing your journey and busting all of these myths. And of course, I would highly recommend that you get the book, Survival Skills for Freelancers. It is going to be the November book club, which is happening on November 6th, which is my birthday. So we're going to get this podcast up before then so people have time to get the book in time. Sarah Townsend, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your mistakes and busting the myths of freelancing. And I know that a lot of people got a lot out of this. So really, really appreciate your time and effort in coming on to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much.